What's up, everybody? My name is Adam Palmer. This is Daily Nonsense. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about some of the sales that were over $250,000 that happened this past week in the sports card market. If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button. And if you are a new viewer, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any future content. Now let's get into it. The week we had in sports cards after the National was pretty impressive, if I'm going to be honest. There was one sale that was a private sale that happened at the National that was $1 million Messi card that I heard sold, like I said, in a private sale. And there was also one of the PSA 10 Mega Cracks Messis sold for $820,000, which I think, at the National, I asked a bunch of people what their dream card was. I think that card and then the Ronaldo Mega Cracks PSA 10 are probably going to be the two that I would consider to be my dream cards, if I was answering my own question there, I suppose. But so last week, we had 10 cards sell for over $250,000. And that was across the board. That wasn't just because, Golden had their big July elite auction and there were some sales from that. But overall, it was just a week where, even if you were to go down to $200,000, there was still like 15, I think it was either 13 to 15 sales over $200,000 across the board. If we're talking like the Monday after the National to over the week, or at least over through the weekend, which included another $1 million sale. That's the first one I'll get to. So that was the ninth $9 million sale of 2025 happened. It was a PSA 9 Roberto Clemente rookie. And I'll talk about the Roberto Clemente in a second. The thing that I thought was most interesting about this past week in sports cards when it came to the sales that were going on were that there wasn't really a specific category. And actually there's one non-sport that's in this category as well. But there wasn't like one category, or there wasn't one player, or there wasn't one sport that really was bigger than any of the other ones. There was baseball, there was basketball, there was a Pokemon card that sold. I don't believe any football. I have the list here because there was like literally so many. So, maybe baseball, basketball, those ones kind of did maybe take over the list a little bit here. But the Roberto Clemente PSA 9 sells for $1.15 million, making it the ninth $1 million sale of 2025. That number is obviously down from the, crazy times in 2020, 2021, 2022, where like Brady contenders rookies and LeBron exquisite RPAs were selling in the $1 million range. And, I think in retrospect, I do sort of wish I could maybe go back and I don't know, it's not really necessarily talk sense into people, but like really maybe look at this from like 1,000 feet or 10,000 feet. And with there being 99 of those cards, and with the contenders, I believe there was 100. Realistically, should the number to 99s, or then in Brady's case, the number to 100s be $1 million? Probably not in retrospect. I think the lower numbered ones, like I know LeBron has, I think it's numbered to 23. Could those sell for $1 million? Yeah, I would say they could probably be $1 million sales of those cards. And I think there was one that sold in that crazy Victor Wembanyama 1-of-1 auction like a couple months ago that sold for like $800,000. So, that was the Clemente, adding to that list of the $1 million cards, I think is important. There was also a Pikachu Illustrator PSA 9 that sold for $625,000. Again, PSA 9 selling for that amount is pretty crazy. And I dabble in Pokemon. I think it's interesting. I don't really have the knowledge, so I'm not going to touch on that one, as much as maybe some of the other ones. There were 2 LeBron cards that were not exquisite autographs, or weren't exquisite RPAs. There was one that sold for $408,000, and then there was one that sold for $350,000. So I think LeBron is probably one of the only players that's active. Maybe Steph Curry. Durant, I think, could be in the conversation, but I think it's either Curry or LeBron. And I think the conversation of which is the best player of this generation is much closer. I do think LeBron ultimately will always go down as probably number 2 behind Jordan. I could see how you could argue Jordan over LeBron by saying how much longevity LeBron had and how many finals he played in. And I could see those arguments, but I don't know. I just find it tough to, and in comparing errors, I'm not even going to try and compare errors. I don't really think it's fair. But there were rookie patch autographs for LeBron that are selling, in the $400,000 range. That's probably what some of those are supposed to go for. Early in his career, early low numbered RPAs. I think those are the ones that you should really be looking at if you're looking to buy any LeBron. Any modern stuff, you really got to go like, I don't know. I think his Kaboom from a couple years ago is pretty big, where he'd had they used the image from him getting the scoring record. I think that's a very interesting card for me if you're looking for more modern LeBron. I think obviously that the triple logo man from the 3 different teams is an interesting one, but that's obviously sort of almost, I don't know. I don't want to say it's unobtainable, but it's like, I don't see that one selling really anytime soon. There also was a Mickey Mantle PSA 7 that sold for $347,000. It's still pretty crazy to me that Mickey Mantle, and I think he's, I don't know, Mickey Mantle is obviously totally different than LeBron. For Mickey Mantle, obviously he doesn't have to worry about like any controversies coming out. Like, and I'm not saying LeBron's going to have any controversy. I don't think he will or does, but like he still has a lot of life to live, and he still has even more basketball to play. He's not even retired yet, which I think is like the craziest thing. And then there was another one that actually Chris Hoge from Card Ladder pointed out, which I thought was a very good one. There was an Ichiro Topps rookie auto PSA 10. There's only 3 of these that sold for $292,000. And the post that Chris Hoge had was 16 years ago. So 16 years ago would have been like 2000, I'm not going to do the math, 2004, 2003, probably. That card sold for $16,000. So like over a 19-year span or a 16-year span, 19-year span, 16, so whatever. Over that year span, there was a dramatic difference in the pricing of that card, which I think is super impressive. The other card that, we're still waiting on one of these other cards to sell, but there was the one of one Caitlin Clark Immaculate logo woman patch autograph that sold for $317,000. So the Flawless sold for $660. The Immaculate sold for $317, and now the National Treasures is the last of the 3 really big cards. There's also the gold, or not the gold, the green one of one Kaboom Caitlin Clark that still, I believe, is known where it is, and I think it's in the market. I forget exactly where it's being sold, but I know Fanatics Collects is selling the National Treasures, which that I think starts over the weekend. I think that the National Treasures probably falls somewhere in that range. I mean, it's insane to think that like these 3 cards could all be over $250,000, which obviously the one 660 was over $500,000. It's really impressive that, a WNBA player and a product that really, I mean, as much grief as I've given the royalty product, realistically, it has clearly sold. And, maybe the pricing, maybe the price tag of that product was maybe priced correctly. I think ultimately, obviously, Caitlin Clark is the chase player in that card. So unless you're pulling some sort of Caitlin Clark, that's the card that you're looking for. So, maybe it was sort of priced correctly. I know they did the Dutch auction and got down to the floor, which was $3,000. And now, some of the cards, I don't know if Panini or anybody really expected these cards to sell for that much. But, it looks like we've got 2 over $250,000. And then we're still waiting on the National Treasures, but that's going to be sold, in the near future. Or at least the auction starts in the near future. That's all we've got for today's episode. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.